If you've never been to the Maryland Renaissance Festival, you don't know what you're missing. It's like a 16th century theme park with shops and pubs, music and performances, all just an hour from DC. The festival opens August 24th and runs Saturdays, Sundays, and Labor Day Monday through October 20th. Tickets are online only at marylandrenaissancefestival.com, and they're cheaper through September 8th, so get yours now, and I'll see you there.
Today on CityCast DC, where is the coolest place to stand in the metro? We put the question to Adam Bressler from Greater Washington, who has written an epic explainer about the unusual system Metro uses to keep stations from becoming DC summer sweatboxes. Stick around to learn everything you need to know about chillers. Today is Thursday, August 22nd. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. All right, so when we think about cooling down something like Metro, my mind goes to air conditioning, but I don't think that's what is in place here. How does their system work?
Yeah, Metro's unique because an conventional air conditioning unit just would not be practical for a system and infrastructure like Metro, just because of the sheer size of the stations and some other factors. You think a standard Metro station underground is 600 feet long, which is even longer than the Washington Monument laid down on its side. It's approximately 40 feet wide and potentially up to 40 feet tall. Conditioning that volume of air just would not be efficient. It would not be effective. It wouldn't be practical in any sense in a traditional way. And beyond that, there's trains coming in and out of the stations. There's giant escalators and elevators coming up and down. So you can't really contain an air like you would in a standard space. So Metro decided to take a unique approach. And instead of having traditional air conditioning units, they had a system of chillers where water would be chilled down to approximately 40 degrees and then would be pumped throughout the station and strategically placed where passengers congregate to help cool down the air strategically where they're standing. So most of the Metro station, most of the volume of air in there is not chilled by any means. But when you're down on the platforms where passengers stand and up on the mezzanines, those areas are strategically pumped with some chilled air to help cool down passengers on hot days.
Wait, so where are these chillers? Just when you walk around town?
Yeah, so it depends based on what type of station you have, where most of them, especially downtown, would go on nearby buildings and co-locate with them. So for instance, the Metro Center chillers in downtown Washington, that is on the roof of a nearby hotel right by the station. And that's convenient for Metro because they could then open up development rights by the station. And it's convenient for the hotel too, because they're able to build a hotel there, which otherwise wouldn't be able to be there. Some other stations further out from downtown have standard, just independent buildings that are fully utilized for Metro chillers. So you would think maybe Medical Center up in Maryland. You think some of the stations out in Congress Heights and Anacostia. You think of potentially up in North Arlington too. Some of those are on top of buildings, but some of those are unique structures that are fully dedicated to Metro chillers. And in fact, several stations have facades of DC row houses. So Metro is very cognizant on not disturbing the environment and the community around these stations. So they built facades around some of the chiller plants. So you see that at Potomac Avenue Station on Capitol Hill. You see up in Georgia Avenue on the Green Line, that is kind of blended in to look like an old-fashioned firehouse. So it's not particularly large, but it just needs to house the cooling tower and then the chillers themselves.
So can you break down the components? Like what makes it cool?
It's tough to describe. It's a instrument that takes in water and then uses kind of a combined cycle. So if you think a power plant, on how a power plant produces heat and electricity. It does the reverse of that. So it transfers heat from the water to a second cycle, and it pumps it throughout the station. And it goes into coils by fans, and the coils cool down the air, and the fans kind of pump it in to where people are standing. And depending on the type of station you have, whether it's a island platform or have side platforms, the mechanism for getting it into the passengers area is a little bit different. If it's a island platform, what you'll see is those iconic metro pylons that are on the platform and have directions and signage and other information. That doubles as supplying the chilled air into the platform. So if you look at the top, there's vents and chilled air comes on out of that. For the side platforms, it is actually baked directly into the concrete walls. So that is much closer to where people stand. So it just comes out of vents in the walls. And when you're riding the metro, you could actually see those vents. They're about at eye level, and that's intentional. They didn't want it to be too high up and just have wasted space that would be not cost effective and not particularly effective at cooling people down. So it's made to be as close as possible to where people stand. You could also see some in escalators too. So you might wonder why there's these odd vents in the side of escalators. That's not the exhaust from the escalator. That's actually incorporating some of the chilled air vents to cool people down.
So if I'm in Metro and I'm hot, what's the coolest place to stand?
If it's an island platform, stand by the pylons. So you'll see the pylons and you'll feel it. If it is side platforms, that is more distributed. So no one place will be as cool. I guess if I had to give a recommendation, go by the ones by the escalators, because those are traditionally the most effective, and you could get closer to them than you would than the ones baked into the concrete.
So the Olympics gave us a small taste, a soupçon of French culture. But now it's time to dive deeper and truly experience it for yourself. The Alliance Française of Washington, D.C. offers language courses tailored to every level. Fall sessions start on September 21st, and if you enroll by August 30th, you will receive a $20 discount. So if you've ever dreamed of ordering your morning cafe in perfect French or discussing art and history with ease, now is your chance. But it's not just about the language courses. A membership with the Alliance Française of Washington, D.C. brings you into a vibrant community that celebrates all things French. You get exclusive access to cultural events, wine tastings, film screenings, and more. Visit www.francedc.org to start your journey. And don't forget, sign up by August 30th and you'll get $20 off tuition when you enroll. The Library of Congress is bringing back its hit costume ball, and the free ticket lottery is open now. Grab your friends and come dressed in your favorite film-inspired attire on September 12th for the Library of Congress Film Costume Ball. The evening will feature a costume contest, live DJ playing iconic film scores, and themed food and cocktails. Guests can also explore treasures from the library's world-renowned collections of film, recorded sound, and performing arts, featuring legendary films such as The Wizard of Oz, Star Wars, and Cinderella. This event will sell out, so register now for the free ticket lottery at loc.gov/live. Who will you come dressed as? Elle Woods, Beetlejuice, James Bond? Start dreaming up your costume and enter the ticket lottery today at loc.gov/live. All right, so one thing I wondered, though, is these stations are way, way underground, and I always assumed it was like, like a cavern down there where it's not that hot anyway. If it weren't for these chillers, how hot would it be?
It really varies, and you are correct that being underground does insulate from the hot heat of Washington summers. Being just underground, it would be potentially 80, 90 degrees on some days, but it wouldn't be quite as hot as the ambience above. Which is certainly nice. And the reverse is true in the winter, where being underground helps insulate some of that heat in. So the caverns do help out.
Do they do warming in the winter?
No, designed effort, so there's no radiators or anything. And that was intentional because the trains actually, by a luck of design, help heat up the stations. Because the trains come into the stations and they have to brake. These are very heavy, very fast trains. And most of that kinetic energy is transferred into heat when it brakes, which helps heat up the surrounding stations. So the passengers don't have to worry about being too cold down there in the winter, but the reverse isn't true in the summer. So there's no mechanism to passively cool down patrons without these chillers being in place.
So when they built Metro, as I understand it, they sort of had a choice, right? Some cities, like New York, what they did is kind of rip out the streets, dig a basement, put some train tracks down, then put up some girders and reestablish the street. So it's like one story down, no air conditioning. It's pretty hot in the summer. Or you could go like DC did for geological reasons. You go way, way, way down and like push a tube through and kind of create these like coffer stations. So when they did that, were they thinking about the fact that even then it was pretty god-awfully hot here in the summer?
Yeah, so it's a multiple factors. For one, as you mentioned, and as many listeners could relate to this time of year, it gets really hot and humid in Washington in a way that it just doesn't in other cities with established subway systems. So at the time when DC was being constructed, the metro, really the only North American cities that had subway systems were New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Montreal, Toronto, Cleveland did as well. And those are all cities with much cooler climates than Washington. So DC definitely had a more pressing need for a cooling system, but also that was a cognizant decision from the designers because unlike those first generation subways in North America, this was being designed following the suburbanization of many communities, especially the Washington region, and it was expressly designed with that suburban commuter in mind. So they wanted to get the commuter coming out from Centerville, Virginia, the commuter coming from Germantown, Maryland, to go and drive to the metro station, park their car, and then ride it into downtown, instead of take a freeway all the way into their job at the Pentagon, their job at K Street, their job on Capitol Hill. And in order to convert some of those commuters from their private air-conditioned vehicle, that was a decision that was made by Metro to incorporate air conditioning and chilling. So all the trains are air-conditioned and the stations are chilled, which wasn't essential. So you look at other cities like New York, Paris, London, they don't have any type of cooling in their systems. When DC expressly decided to do that for both of those reasons, both attracting these choice commuters and dealing with some of the hotter conditions in the area.
So I'm curious, since Metro was built like 50 years ago, there's been an explosion globally of new subway systems, some of them in very, very hot places. I've been in the subway in Singapore, which is right on the equator. It is air conditioned, like actually air conditioned, and they have these little doors between the platform and the train so that they don't have to waste air conditioning on the tracks. There's Metro in New Delhi, a whole bunch of places. Has anyone else adopted this DC style system or not?
I'm sure some have. It's not very popular because after Metro was built, as you mentioned with Singapore, it was just much more effective to they're called platform screen doors. And not only do they allow climate control in the stations, but there's also other operational and safety benefits. For instance, it keeps people from falling on the tracks and it keeps trains moving on time. And there's other benefits in there. And I imagine if Metro were built 20 years after it had been, those would have been incorporated from day one. And that would have been probably a more effective way at cooling down passengers, is if you fully enclose the stations, especially underground, and separate where the trains are coming in and out. You're able to address some of the issues of a conventional air conditioning system. So it was really unique in being the time period of when Metro was created, and that being the forefront of technology, when beyond that, it probably isn't the most effective. And you see today that being part of the problem that Metro has to deal with. They're very fortunate to have this system in place to cool down passengers in a way that New York and Boston and Philly don't. But on the flip side, it is expensive and technologically difficult to maintain. A couple years back, Metro really struggled because the chiller plant that supplied the chilled water and air in DuPont Circle Station and Farragut North was malfunctioning. And that was built directly underneath Connecticut Avenue, which made it incredibly difficult to maintain and fix and repair. And that is just something that Metro had to deal with, unfortunately, due to the circumstances of the design that it was endowed with. And I can't speak for WMATA directly, the transit authority, but I imagine if they designed this from scratch today, they probably wouldn't have a similar system.
So are there any plans to expand it now or to change the way they cool it?
Nothing in place. A couple years back, Metro went back and repaired and replaced the existing chillers. As you mentioned, some of these date back until the earliest stations that opened in the 1970s, and they were reaching the end of their useful lives. And beyond that, the technology was pretty antiquated too. So Metro replaced those and received a pretty significant improvement in terms of energy efficiency, which was great. It helped save water and helped conserve energy when they went back and replaced those. And that process is wrapping up soon. Almost all the stations with chillers have had theirs replaced over the past couple years. Metro is talking about potentially building new stations in Georgetown and downtown. If those are constructed, it's so far out to speculate on what technologies those would use. So there's a potential they'll include chillers as similar to the previous stations, but it's also possible that they go with a completely new technology and a completely new style and go more in terms of the Singapore route with the platform screen doors and an actual robust air conditioning system.
Adam, thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, talk about it with a fellow commuter by the Chillers on your next Metro ride. You can also rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.